Today I'm going to be doing flatbreads. It initially started with this recipe, but I really don't like the coconut flour for this. You can use her recipe. I found it on, let's see, myheartbeats.com. She's got a couple of really neat gluten-free flatbread recipes, but for me, I'm going to be using cassava flour, tapioca flour, and probably millet flour. I have here, it's written sorghum flour, but, and they're interchangeable, sorghum and millet, but I happen to be out of sorghum, so I'm going to do millet. And I will write out a better recipe because this is just crazy notes all over the place, and but I'll write it out more specifically as we go along, and I'll just tell you what I did. A little disclosure about this recipe: I actually don't really like it. Well, let's back up. I do like it. It suffices, but I wouldn't say it's like the be-all and the end-all. There's definitely room for improvement, but it's the best I have for now, and it's a pain in the butt to make. I really hate making it. Takes all day, but it is really nice to have these in the fridge for the next 2 weeks, available and ready to go. So without further ado, let's get measuring. I'm going to be multiplying this recipe times 12. If I'm going to bake, if I'm going to cook, I'm going to do it. So right now I have times 6 times, and that would be 210 grams of cassava flour. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double that, and I'm going to do 420 grams of cassava flour. So I'm going to get measuring, and I'll be back shortly. Next is sorghum flour. Like I said, I'm going to be doing a mixture. I have here millet flour and sorghum, so I have a little bit of both, so I'll do a mixture here. But I'm going to do 400 grams. I'm doubling the amount here. So 400 grams. So the next one that I'm going to be adding is tapioca flour. And it's really more of a starch than a flour. My recipe says 375 grams, so I'm going to be doing that twice. So I guess that would be 600, 700 and something, 750 perhaps. All right, so I'm going to do the math and add that. Okay, so tapioca flour is in here. Just so you know, cassava flour and tapioca flour are both made from the same plant, the yucca plant, the manioc plant, the cassava plant, tapioca plant. They're all different names for the same plant. The tapioca flour is more a starch, kind of similar to arrowroot or cornstarch, the way it's processed. And the flour, the cassava flour, is the heavier version that contains all the extra good stuff in it. Cassava flour has a funny odor and a slightly odd taste. I don't know. As a flour, it's not one of the favorites, which is why I cut it with sorghum flour. Obviously, the starch, the tapioca starch, makes it just holds everything together really well when you're making baked goods. So anyway, long story short, we are going to do water next, and I have 1,125 milligrams of water times 2. So let me work on that, and I'll get back to you. All right, next is 6 teaspoons of salt. Okay, last but not least is oil. I have 375 milligrams of oil, and that's going to be times 2, which I guess would be 700 milliliters. I'm sorry, I meant milliliters, not milligrams. So yeah, 700 milliliters of oil. So of course I'm going to do olive oil. Trying to think what else here. I don't know. And now for the stirring part. This is actually tricky because the tapioca starch likes to kind of form a brick when it hits water. So initially this will be a little bit of elbow grease trying to break everything up. You can see that this is very oily, but Hold on, Hazel, I'm talking. As I can say, as I have said before in the past, this is a high oil diet. You're not going to be spending your money on fancy steaks or fancy this or that. It's going to be olive oil. That's where you're going to be spending your money. But it's well worth it because it's very, very good for you. All right, so let me put in the elbow grease and stir this up. Okay, so that took a little while with my whisk, just working on it. I probably could have avoided all that had I actually sifted the flour before I added the liquid, because it really is the tapioca flour that's the offender there. To get the correct consistency, I added 500 milliliters more of water. Okay, so we have 1,125 times 2, which is 2,300 milligrams of water, plus an extra 500 brings us up to 2,800 milliliters of water. Okay, and this is the consistency that you want. It's kind of like a crepe, okay? I have 2 pans that have been heating up, plus a third over here. This is our outdoor grilling thing that we take camping, and I might actually fit an extra one on this burner. But basically, the more burners you can have going to get this job done, the better. I'm going to grease with a little bit of avocado oil to begin with, but then I probably won't grease the pan after that. Okay, so now it's a waiting game. Unfortunately, this is kind of like a low and slow process, and this is the tedious part. And frankly, it takes a long time. It takes me all afternoon to get through my big bowl. And it's better to go low and slow to make sure the insides cook, because it is a very wet, oily type of bread. So if you do it too high, you know, it'll burn and not cook all the way through. So let's see. You definitely want a really good nonstick pan, and you don't even want to attempt to turn it until it's cooked, because there's a gummy texture to this, and if you try to flip it before it's too well cooked, it'll just stick to your spatula and make a big mess, and it'll be really hard to turn. So definitely let it go for a while. Like I already know from experience that this, I can just tell by the way it's bouncing. It needs to go longer before I attempt to flip it. And make sure you have a really good nonstick pan. This is my best pan, and then my other 3 pans that I'm using, they're just not as good. Okay, so this guy, both these I would say, I have a little too high, and this is, like I said, a camping stove, so it's a little bit tricky to get the temperature right. I'm not used to cooking on this. Like I said, I oiled the initial time, but I won't do that once I get going here. Okay, so this guy's still going, but I think yeah, he's gummy. He's not ready to turn. They're all gummy, frankly. Yes, baby. Hold on. Well, hold on a minute. Let me finish. I have these racks out ready to go to put the flatbreads on to cool. And over here we have Hazel doing her homeschooling, and she is being a superstar today, flying through her work. Next is Spanish. So some pans I have to, you know, kind of work and scrape at the edges before I flip it. This one is slightly oilier probably than the others, because these cast iron pans, I don't know. This one just still feels a little gummy, so I'll let that one go. Let's check this one. This is probably one of my most annoying pans. I really have trouble with it, things sticking. So I really got to work the sides. Sorry, it's hard to hold the phone while I'm doing this fight with this thing. But I find, actually, the longer you let it sit, the less I have to fight with it, and the less trouble I have flipping it. Okay, this is too low of a temperature. Anyway, so you do have to fiddle with it and then get in your rhythm. But once you're in your rhythm, it should go fairly quickly. Actually, no, that's a lie. This is not a quick process, which is why I multitask. So basically I have these going in the kitchen, low and slow. And you can see, I mean, this is why I don't like doing them. They're just a pain. Like, you can see, they're just gummy. And it takes a long time for them to cook. Maybe I'll just turn up the heat a little bit. Just a little bit. And, but actually, you know, once I do get into a rhythm, it's not quite so bad. So in the meantime, I'm going to be multitasking as these things slowly do their thing. Okay, so these are kind of pretty much done. They tend to usually be like gummy on one side and then kind of dry on the other looking. So I don't know, whatever. But I bring them over here and I let them cool down and just keep this train rolling all afternoon. So I find that, you know, sometimes this tends to settle, so you definitely want to mix it around again. And also sometimes as the process goes on, I find it gets thicker and thicker. I don't know if the flour absorbs more of the liquid, but I also find that sometimes I have to keep adding a little bit of water here and there just to keep the desired consistency. So two things just to keep in mind. All right, one more thing I do. I grab the spoon and I do like 1, 2, 3 spoonfuls, about this size, in here. But then at the end I go bam, bam, bam on the edge, which kind of helps flatten things out a little bit. But I don't spread it out with a spoon like some people do that with crepes or other things. Just let it kind of spread out naturally. Don't use the bottom of the spoon to spread it because that's just going to mess it up and gum it up. So just let it spread out and let it cook, let it do its thing. So what do I use these for? I use them for pizza, I use them for quesadilla, I use them for pita bread dipped in hummus and guacamole. I use them for, I do a fish wrap where I do like vegetables that have been mixed with salad dressing, and then I do like wild caught fish. You could do shrimp as well, or some other type of whatever that you want to do. You could even do cheese. I mean, honestly, you can use them the way you would a tortilla, but yeah, like I said, for the kids, for lunches, I tend to do quesadilla or peanut butter on them. Actually, no, we don't do peanut butter in my house. We do walnut butter and almond butter. Trying to think what else I can tell you about them. Not much. All right, I am signing off, and I hope you enjoy the process. Okay, one more thing. I'm a little bit in my rhythm now, and you can see that they do get poofy and nice, and they do get kind of like a pizza dough quality. They still are a little bit gummies on one side, so I usually try to cook that side. But yeah, this one I just put here a second ago, and this is perfect for like pita bread. It's looking really good. So anyhow, I wrote out this for you. I will take a picture of it for you. But this is it. One thing I would say is, depending on whether you do sorghum or millet, you might have to mess around slightly with the water to get the right consistency. But that's something you're going to figure out for yourself anyway, how runny you like it. Anyhow, but this should serve you well.